In the dead of winter, 1931, deep within the Arctic Circle, a mystery began that would become one of the most legendary manhunts in Canadian history. It's a story of a lone trapper, a brutal standoff, and a chase across the frozen wilderness that pushed human endurance to its absolute limit. This is the chilling true story of the mad trapper of Rat River. Our story starts in the remote, unforgiving landscape of the Northwest Territories. Near the Yukon border, life here was tough, a constant battle against the elements. The few souls who called this place home were mostly indigenous hunters, and a handful of hardy trappers, all connected by a shared understanding of survival. Into this isolated world walks a stranger. He calls himself Albert Johnson. No one knew where he came from, what his past was, or why he sought such extreme solitude. He was quiet, spoke with a slight accent that some thought was Scandinavian, and seemed to have an endless supply of cash. He built a small, 8 by 10 foot cabin on the banks of the Rat River, a fortress of a shack designed to withstand not just the brutal cold, but an assault. The first whispers of trouble started small. Johnson was accused by local First Nations trappers of interfering with their trap lines, a serious offense in a land where a successful hunt meant the difference between eating and starving. He was allegedly springing their traps, hanging them in trees, and causing general chaos. Now, this was more than just a nuisance, it was a direct threat to their livelihood. So, the local community did what you do when there's a problem. They called the law. The Royal Canadian Mounted Police, or the RCMP, were the only authority in this vast, untamed territory. On December 26, 1931, to Mounties, Constable Alfred King and Special Constable Joe Bernard made the long, arduous journey by dogsled to Johnson's cabin to ask him about the complaints. They expected a routine chat, maybe a stern warning. They knocked on the door. No answer. They knocked again, announcing they were the police. Still silence. As they tried to force the door open, a shot rang out from inside, tearing through the wooden planks. The bullet struck Constable King in the chest, seriously wounding him. Bernard managed to drag the injured King back to their sled and began a frantic 80-mile race against time to get him to the nearest settlement, Aklavik, for medical help. The manhunt was now on. This wasn't just about tampered traps anymore. This was attempted murder of a police officer. A posse was formed, consisting of more Mounties and local trappers who knew the land like the back of their hands. They returned to Johnson's cabin, this time armed and prepared for a fight. They surrounded the tiny fortress and demanded his surrender. Johnson's only reply was more gunfire. For hours, a siege ensued. The posse riddled the cabin with bullets, but Johnson, protected by the thick walls and his own cunning, fired back with deadly accuracy. The temperature plummeted to 40 degrees below zero, and the attackers were freezing. Realizing a direct assault was suicide, they decided they needed a better plan. They needed dynamite. The posse retreated to Aklavik to regroup and gather supplies. They returned on January 9th with a team of nearly a dozen men and a stockpile of explosives. Their plan was simple: blow the cabin to smithereens. They surrounded the structure again, and after a final, unanswered call to surrender, they lit the fuse. A massive explosion erupted, blowing the roof clean off and collapsing one of the walls. The posse waited, certain that no one could have survived such a blast. But as the smoke cleared, Albert Johnson emerged from the crater, guns blazing. In the ensuing chaos, he managed to slip away into the darkness of the Arctic night, vanishing into the wilderness. What followed was one of the most incredible feats of survival and evasion ever recorded. For the next 48 days, Albert Johnson led the RCMP on a chase across more than 150 miles of the most hostile terrain on Earth. He traveled only at night, in blizzard conditions, with temperatures frequently dropping below -40. He was a ghost, a phantom in the snow. The posse, with their dog sleds and superior numbers, found it nearly impossible to keep up. Johnson was a master of woodcraft. He used clever tricks to hide his trail, like following the tracks of caribou herds or walking backwards in snowshoes, to confuse his pursuers. He seemed to survive on almost nothing, moving with a speed and endurance that baffled the experienced local trappers. He was carrying a rifle, a shotgun, and a significant amount of ammunition, but little else. The chase took on a life of its own. Radio broadcasts, a new technology at the time, crackled with daily updates, captivating a world hungry for drama during the Great Depression. The mysterious fugitive became a folk figure, an anti-hero defying the authorities in the Great White North. The press dubbed him the Mad Trapper of Rat River, but for the men on his trail, it was a grim and deadly serious business. They were exhausted, Frostbitten and constantly on edge, Johnson was always one step ahead. The Mounties decided to bring in their own secret weapon, a man named Wat May, a legendary First World War flying ace. May was one of Canada's most famous bush pilots, and the RCMP hoped he could use his ski-equipped Balanka monoplane to spot Johnson from the air. This was one of the first times an aircraft was used in a manhunt, and it would prove to be a game-changer. Flying in the extreme Arctic conditions was incredibly dangerous, but May was fearless. He flew reconnaissance missions, dropping supplies to the ground posse and helping to track the elusive trappers' movements. Across the vast, white expanse, Johnson's plan was to cross the Richardson Mountains, a treacherous, jagged range that most considered impassable in winter, and escape into the Yukon. It was a desperate, almost suicidal gamble. Using incredible strength and ingenuity, he scaled a 7,000-foot peak in a blizzard, a feat that his pursuers, even the seasoned Gwich'in trackers, thought was impossible. He had managed to put some distance between himself and the posse, but Wat May, circling in the sky, spotted his tracks leading over the mountains. The net was closing. May was able to land his plane on a frozen river and inform the ground party of Johnson's direction. The final confrontation took place on February 17, 1932. On the frozen surface of the Eagle River, the posse, guided by May from the air, finally cornered Johnson in the open. A fierce firefight erupted. Johnson, taking cover behind a snowbank, fought with desperate courage. He managed to shoot and kill one of the Mounties, Constable Edgar Millen, but he was hopelessly outnumbered. The posse returned fire, and in the final volley of bullets, Albert Johnson, the mad trapper of Rat River, was brought down. When they finally approached his body, the mystery only deepened. His identity was completely unknown. He had no papers, no identification of any kind. He was estimated to be in his 30s or 40s, in peak physical condition. An examination revealed he had endured incredible hardship, with old bullet wounds and healed fractures. He also had over $2,000 in cash on him, a fortune at the time, and a pocket full of gold fillings, suggesting he might have robbed graves or been a prospector. Despite extensive investigations that continued for decades, his true name and origins have never been confirmed. Who was Albert Johnson? A jilted lover? A draft dodger? A criminal on the run from another crime? The theories are endless, but the truth was buried with him in the Arctic snow. The story of the Mad Trapper remains a powerful chapter in Canadian folklore. It's a testament to the harshness of the North, the tenacity of the RCMP, and the incredible, almost superhuman will of one mysterious man. He was a villain, a killer who shot a police officer without hesitation. Yet, his epic struggle for survival against impossible odds has also made him a legend, a symbol of rugged individualism and defiance. It's a chilling, real-life horror story that reminds us that sometimes, the greatest mysteries aren't found in fiction, but in the desolate, frozen corners of our own world. Thanks for watching. If you found this story as fascinating as I did, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into history's most compelling mysteries. See you next time.